the UFC 151 cancellation. Jon Jones was set to defend his belt against Dan Henderson at UFC 151, but just days before the fight, Henderson pulled out with a knee injury. The UFC scrambled to save the card and offered Chael as a replacement on barely over a week's notice. Jones turned it down, saying he didn't have enough time to prepare for someone like Chael. That call completely backfired. With no main event left, the UFC decided to cancel the entire card, which had never happened in the company's history. The backlash was brutal. Fans were furious, and even Dana White himself publicly blamed Jones for ruining a huge event and leaving everyone hanging. At the time, people were already starting to see Jones as arrogant or fake, so this just poured gasoline on the fire. Fair or not, most of the blame landed on his shoulders, while Henderson and the UFC walked away with little criticism. Personally, I blame Dana White for this. It's understandable from Jon's side. First DUI. Every messy story has a starting point, and for Jon Jones, it kicked off in 2012. At that time, he was the young champ at light heavyweight, already building a reputation as someone destined for greatness. But outside the cage, cracks were starting to show. One night, driving his Bentley Continental GT, things got bad fast. He lost control and slammed straight into a pole in the early hours of the morning. Thankfully, nobody was seriously hurt, not even the two women riding with him. Still, it was a big wake-up call. Police hit him with a DUI charge, and the court ordered him to get something called an ignition interlock device. Basically, it's like a built-in breathalyzer for your car. Before you can even start the engine, you've got to blow into it to prove you're not drunk. If your alcohol level is too high, the car just won't start. On top of that, he lost his license for 6 months. For fans, it was shocking. The guy who looked unstoppable in the octagon was already stumbling hard outside of it. Looking back, it almost feels like that crash was the first domino in what turned into a long, chaotic streak of run-ins with the law. The Instagram comments. By 2014, Jon Jones already had the villain tag for a lot of fans, and then he gave his critics even more ammo. On Instagram, he was caught leaving a string of homophobic comments under the photos of a Gustafsson fan. When people called him out, Jones claimed his phone had been stolen and that his account was hacked, a defense nobody really bought, especially since a new photo of him showed up on the account around the same time. The first failed drug test. By the time Jon Jones was set to fight DC at UFC 182, people already knew he liked to party. There had been rumors about his lifestyle for years, but none of it had really touched his fighting career. That all changed when his pre-fight drug test came back positive for cocaine. Technically, cocaine wasn't banned for competition in Nevada at the time, so the fight went on as planned. Jones walked into the cage, beat Cormier, and left with the belt still around his waist. But once the news came out afterward, the whole story looked a lot different. The UFC fined him $25,000 and sent him to rehab, though Jones later admitted he left after just 1 day. He even came out and said he kept using cocaine for years after that. The hit and run. If there's one controversy that completely flipped Jon Jones's image, it was the hit and run in 2015. Up to that point, people saw him as reckless, but still untouchable once the cage door closed. Then the news dropped. Jones had crashed his car into 2 other vehicles in Albuquerque, and one of them was carrying a pregnant woman. Instead of staying at the scene like anyone else would, he panicked and ran. And just when you think that's as bad as it could get, he actually came back. Not to check on the woman, not to see if anyone was okay, but to grab a handful of cash and whatever else he left in the car before taking off again. That's what turned the whole thing from a regular charge into a felony. Once the police pieced it all together, Jones was everywhere in the headlines. The UFC stripped him of his title and gave him an indefinite suspension that ended up lasting 18 months. For a lot of fans, this was the breaking point. It wasn't just the party guy stuff anymore, this was serious. And it really cemented the idea that Jon Jones's biggest opponent was always going to be himself. Drag racing arrest. After the hit and run and his suspension, Jon Jones was supposed to be turning his life around. Instead, in March 2016, he landed in trouble again. Police pulled him over, saying he was drag racing at a stoplight. Body cam footage later showed Jones arguing with the officer, calling him a liar and a pig as things escalated. He ended up getting hit with a stack of charges: drag racing, reckless driving, improper lane change, and even improper display of a license plate. For most people, that might have been a few tickets and a bad day. But since Jones was still on probation from the hit and run, this turned into a much bigger problem. He ended up spending a couple of nights in county jail before facing a judge. In the end, most of the charges got dropped, but he still wasn't off the hook. Jones was ordered to complete 60 more hours of community service, take driving school and anger management classes, and was given a deferred sentence. The punishment itself wasn't the worst he'd faced, but the footage and his attitude during it made it another PR nightmare. UFC 200 drug test failure. UFC 200 was hyped up as the biggest card in history, with Jon Jones finally set for the rematch against Daniel Cormier. Everything was falling into place, until just 2 days before the event when the news broke that Jones had failed a drug test. He tested positive for estrogen blockers, which are usually taken after a cycle of steroids. At the press conference, Jones broke down in tears and said it was because of a sexual enhancement pill. Believe him or not, the damage was done. The fight got scrapped, the whole card fell apart, and DC ended up fighting Anderson Silva on just 2 days' notice. What should have been a massive super fight turned into a slow, awkward 3-rounder that nobody really wanted. The UFC stripped Jones of his interim belt and suspended him for a year. Later, USADA accepted his story about the tainted pill, but by then, it didn't matter. He had already blown the biggest payday of his career and given fans another reason to doubt everything he said. For a guy many people considered the best fighter alive, it was another reminder that his toughest opponent wasn't Cormier, it was himself. UFC 232 relocation drama. Now this one was crazy, even by Jon Jones standards. In 2018, he was lined up to face Alexander Gustafsson at UFC 232. It was a huge rematch, fans were buzzing, and Vegas was set to host the card. Then, right before fight week, everything blew up. Jones failed another drug test. This time, it wasn't for anything new, just a tiny trace of a steroid metabolite still pulsing in his system from a past use. The Nevada State Athletic Commission wasn't having it. With the holidays coming up, they said they needed more time to sort it out and refused to give him the green light. So what did Dana White do? With only a few days left, he moved the entire event from Las Vegas to California. The California Commission looked at the situation, gave Jones the thumbs up, and the fight was back on, just in a totally different state. The fallout was brutal. Fans who had already bought tickets and booked Vegas trips were left scrambling. Fighters on the card were furious, having to adjust travel, training, and schedules at the last minute. Some even had to leave team members behind because it was such a rushed switch. And Jon Jones? He didn't deal with any of it. He showed up, fought, and walked away with the belt. To a lot of people, the favoritism was obvious. If this had been almost anyone else, the fight would have been cancelled. But because it was Jon Jones, one of the UFC's biggest moneymakers, Dana made sure the show went on.
It's a bit of a hassle for all of us. It pisses me off. I'm a bit disappointed it's going to cost all of us. You know, I don't think it's going to cost Jon Jones much, but it'll cost us, cost my family a fair bit.
I think it was more of like an annoyance. I'm just like, really? For one person?
The 2019 battery charge. Just when it seemed like Jon Jones might finally be keeping things steady, another headline hit in 2019. Not long after his razor-close win over Thiago Santos, news broke that a waitress at a strip club in Albuquerque had accused him of going too far. She said Jones slapped her, tried to kiss her without permission, and even put her in a chokehold. For most fighters, that would have been shocking news, but with Jon, fans kind of shrugged and went, here we go again. It dragged his name through the mud all over again, and this wasn't the type of story that just disappeared quietly. In the end, Jones pleaded no contest, which meant he didn't admit guilt, but also didn't fight the charge. The court gave him a 90-day deferred sentence with conditions like staying away from alcohol, drugs, and of course the strip club where it all happened. The 2020 lockdown arrest. In March 2020, when the whole world was locked down, Jon Jones still found a way to make headlines for all the wrong reasons. Late at night in Albuquerque, police heard what sounded like gunshots and followed the noise. That's when they found Jones sitting in his Jeep and just shooting in the air. Things only got worse when officers searched the car and found an open bottle of alcohol and a loaded handgun under the seat. He was arrested and charged with aggravated DWI, negligent use of a firearm, possession of an open container, and driving without proof of insurance. When it all went to court, Jones pled guilty and was sentenced to 4 days of house arrest plus 48 hours of community service and 90 days of outpatient therapy. For fans, it was another low point. Instead of focusing on his career, the greatest light heavyweight in UFC history was making the news for drinking and shooting guns in the middle of a pandemic. The Hall of Fame night arrest. Jon Jones's 2021 Hall of Fame induction should have been a night to celebrate. He was smiling, doing interviews, and for once, the headlines were positive. But with Jon, good moments never seem to last. Just hours after the ceremony, he was arrested in Las Vegas on charges of domestic battery and tampering with a police vehicle. According to reports, the hotel called the police after his daughter asked them to. When officers showed up, they found his fiancée with marks on her face and blood on her clothes. She tried to downplay it, saying it was just from lipstick, but it didn't look good. Jones was taken into custody, and things only got worse when he started banging his head against a police car and threatening the officers. His bail was set at $16,000, which he posted quickly, but by then, the damage was already done. Jon's retirement. When people bring up Jon Jones as the GOAT, the conversation always comes back to one name, Tom Aspinall. Jones has already done it all, youngest champion in UFC history, a dominant run at light heavyweight, and now a heavyweight title too. But when he announced his retirement, a lot of people said it was really because he was avoiding Tom. And they are not wrong, Aspinall is a different kind of problem. He's big, athletic, and technical in a way most heavyweights aren't. He's got the speed, knockout power, and slick submissions. To many fans, he looks like the better fighter right now. That's why Jones stepping away before facing him doesn't sit right. Jones insists his legacy is already set, that he doesn't need Aspinall to prove anything, but fans aren't buying it. If he really wants to shut everyone up and leave no doubt, he has to take out the young lion. Until then, the GOAT debate will always feel unfinished. Personally, I'm with John on this. He's already done enough. Even if he fights and beats Tom, give it 10 years, and there will just be another fighter people point to and say, he's better than Jones.